Hello and welcome to the Browns Blitz. Today is Tuesday, February 3rd, and this is episode number 37. I'm your host, Rod Bloom, and joining me today is my brother, Jeff. How are things going, Jeff?
Going good, Rod. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Doing just fine. The weather's kind of wild and stuff, but, we're past the Super Bowl. We're officially into the off season for the Browns. What can I say?
And the groundhog did not see his shadow, which means there won't be 6 more weeks of basketball.
Yeah. We can't talk about winter. I don't think we've really had a winter yet. So.
No, not really.
Yeah. The whole groundhog thing caught me off guard. I'm like, I know it's February 2nd, but I'm still waiting for winter to start. Not that I'm a fan or anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of think there's definitely something good about the ground freezing, I think, isn't there?
When you have a gravel driveway, there is. Yeah. Otherwise, it's muddy all winter. I was just looking at some of my pictures on my phone the other day, and I had a picture of me washing the car on February, I think it was February 12th or 13th, something like that, of 2017, which, almost 3 years ago today. Yeah. And it was, I'm in shirt sleeves and I'm outside washing the car, because it was like 65, 70 degrees in the middle of February. So, it happens. So it sure seems like, it's happening a lot more now than when we were kids.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, we have those stories to fall back on, though. Those will always be there.
Right.
Walking to school in the, 2 feet of snow and everything.
Yeah, uphill both ways.
Yeah, definitely. So,
I tell people that I actually did walk 3 miles a day to school, and they don't believe me.
Yeah.
But it was, it was 0.7 of a mile each direction, and I walked home for lunch. So it really was. I did walk 3 miles a day to go to school.
It was good for you too.
Right.
Yeah. Really wasn't that bad of a walk.
Yeah.
So anyways, let's talk a little bit of Browns. I mean, the Super Bowl's over. I thought it was a good game. The Browns weren't in it, of course, but I think it was a pretty enjoyable game. Since that game was over, the Browns have and Stefanski, they've been able to fill out the coaching staff. Joe Woods became official as the defensive coordinator. I know you're not going to get all hyped up over the coaching staff. I mean, to me, I look at it and it seems like a good staff. I think it's young. I'm like, great, they can get to work now. I don't see anybody on the staff that doesn't belong on an NFL coaching staff. So good. So it's a positive step. But I'm not going to do cartwheels this year over the coaching staff.
Mm-hmm.
I think they did a good job of being diverse and looking a lot of different directions, and I think they brought in some good people. So hopefully they can all work together, like the goal that they've set up, and hopefully Stefanski can be the the CEO of this team like he needs to be, and
right.
And just kind of keep everything under control and delegate when needed and all that. So, but other than that, I think there's going to be a lot of people talking about, some things on the schedule coming up. The Browns schedule for next year seems to be in the news. People are talking a lot about the staff. They're doing mock drafts. They're talking about free agents and who the Browns should go after. I don't really want to talk about any of that. That's all speculation. It's all speculation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, it's a long off season. We've got a lot of time to dive into that stuff. So,
right.
Was there anything in the news really that struck you, Jeff, that you wanted to bring up, or are you ready to move on?
Yeah, as far as the team goes, I'm in alignment with you right now that it's premature to start talking about what sort of impact the coaching staff will have, what sorts of moves might happen, draft-wise, free agent-wise, any of that stuff. You know what? There's several months to build out a roster. We know that whenever you bring in a new regime, there's roster turnover. There's really, I mean, outside of 10 or so players, there's not a lot of what I would consider long-term commitment to players with this team. The few picks that remain going back over the last 4 or 5 years, the high picks, guys who are, we're going to have to make decisions on with contracts and so forth. Yep. All that's got to get worked out over the next, few months, but really building the back end of the roster is going to, it's going to happen behind the scenes. It's going to be picking up this guy here and this guy there. So yeah, I agree. Why spend a lot of energy right now with the speculation on all that? But that's really what we like to do as fans, because the draft, let's face it, the draft is our Super Bowl. We don't have anything else really to look forward to on a yearly basis, once we get past the first couple of games, usually. So the draft is, hey, how is the draft going to, change our fortunes this year? I did enjoy the Super Bowl this year. I think the last several years, the game's been pretty disappointing game in itself. One thing I took away from the game this year was it really felt like the officiating sort of took a back seat to the game, which I haven't been able to say a lot lately with NFL games. So I don't know if that was a conscious effort or if that's just kind of the way things played out. But it was nice to see a game where there wasn't, questionable calls everywhere and reviews every 10 seconds and all the things that drive you crazy, right?
Yeah, I got to agree with you on that. I mean, the only call that I can really think of that people were really talking about that should have been challenged or should have been reviewed was the OPI on the 49ers before half. And I thought it was clearly OPI. So that was the only call I really heard people even really talking about. And I thought it was right on. So it was nice.
Something else I found interesting, just watching the game was, there were some, I'll just say, interesting play calls at times. Risky play calls. Things that you don't normally expect to see in a Super Bowl. Okay. And I made the comment to a few of the people I was watching the game with, that, I wonder what the reaction would be if a Browns coach made that play call. It's a great call when it works. It's a stupid call when it doesn't work. But here you are in the Super Bowl, and in theory, you know what works for you, and you've had a couple of weeks to study your opponent and game plan and everything, and really that's what you came up with, right? But because teams were in the Super Bowl, it's like, oh wow, that was genius. You hear the commentators, wow, that was a great call. I don't know if it was a great call or if it just the fact that it worked was impressive. That the players executed and you got the first down, made it a good call. Whereas, several times I thought, Shanahan ran the ball when he probably shouldn't have, or threw the ball when he should have run it, to manage the clock a little better. But because he's Kyle Shanahan and, they had a great year, he kind of gets a pass on it, although I have seen several stories this, the last couple of days questioning Kyle Shanahan's play calling ability. He blew the game when when he was offensive coordinator for Atlanta, blew the Super Bowl. And then others saying that, he blew this one with poor play calling.
Yeah. I'm gonna say the Chiefs won the game rather than saying that the 49ers lost the game. I'm very comfortable saying that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, we talked a while back about what you want to see in a young quarterback that makes you think that they've arrived, that they're leading. And I got to give Mahomes credit for, all three games, they came back from, I think, double-digit deficits.
Yeah, and after throwing 2 interceptions,
well,
to
which
not
he had
hang
never
your head,
done.
to just stay out there and keep slinging it.
Right. So that's what we look for in a young quarterback is the ability, when you're down in the fourth quarter, can you rally your troops? Can you be that leader, and go out and put points on the board and get your team back in the game? And he absolutely did that, and then some.
Yeah, I want to read a tweet that Peter Jones put out. Now this is going back to the play calling. If you recall when the 49ers were down at about the 2-yard line and the guys all lined up and then they did a shift and I think they did a direct snap to the tight end, I believe. If you remember that play and they ended up scoring. I can't remember. Yeah. Or no, it wasn't. He said it was to the tailback. Yeah. So I think it went to Mossert.
Right.
Here's Peter's tweet, and I think you'll get a kick out of this, but I want everybody to hear this. Peter says, "Okay, I still can't get over it. The Chiefs lining up in the Notre Dame box formation and then employing the shift exactly as Lambeau ran it in the 20s and early 1930s with a snap direct to the tailback. That was a little glimpse into Packers history. That was so cool."
Right.
So they're literally pulling a play out from the 1920s and 30s.
Yeah.
And running it. And it worked.
Yeah. And, is it a genius play call or is it the timing of the play call? Why did it work? Just probably good timing, good execution, maybe, all of the above. But boy,
I don't think anybody knew what they were doing out there.
If that play had gotten stuffed, just imagine the reaction.
Well, we know how people of Cleveland would have reacted to their coach.
Right.
We know that. I mean, when you have an innovative coach, you're going to have to learn to live and die with some of those plays occasionally.
Right.
I think that's how it is. That's just a fact. So I don't have a problem with it. I really don't.
There's a couple of schools of thought, and different coaches espouse these that, you line up and, it's strength against strength and you just beat the other guy even if he knows what's coming. And then there's the other school of thought where, you try to do what the opponent doesn't expect. You cross him up and you beat him by game planning and strategy and there's probably some of each that happens in every NFL game.
Yeah.
And not one isn't necessarily right or wrong all the time.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, I agree. I was expecting the 49ers to run the ball more. I thought they would there near the end. I started Mossert in my little FanDuel lineup, my $1 FanDuel lineup that I put together. So, I thought he was going to get a lot more carries than he did there in the second half once they got up. I was kind of surprised they were still throwing, but you're playing the Chiefs and the Chiefs, how can you question Shanahan? I mean, all these people are questioning him. Look at the turnaround he's had with the team and the success. So yeah, you can question a play, but overall, I find it real tough for people, to believe that these people are smarter than he is. Okay.
Right. Well, that's what's great about hindsight and,
Monday
you can always,
Monday
right,
morning quarterbacking. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, everybody gets to be smarter than the guy that's making the decisions in real time.
That's right. That's right.
So, yeah,
So,
go ahead.
oh no, go ahead and finish your thought.
I was just going to say, the other thing that's interesting to me is that you look at how Shanahan got to this point. Just finishing the thought on him, I believe 6-10 his first year, 4-12. Last year they end up taking Nick Bosa in the draft with the number 2 pick, I think it was.
I believe, yeah.
And this year they're in the Super Bowl.
I mean, the 4-12 was partially because Garoppolo tore his, he tore his his ACL, I think, and and I think he had some other injuries. So, but yeah, I mean, they won 4 games. So yeah.
Yeah, but in reality, I mean, if that same thing had happened in Cleveland, he wouldn't have gotten a third year, and it makes you wonder, going back in history, how many times, if we had given a guy a third year, could that have been us?
Yeah, and I know the arguments because I've been in enough arguments on Twitter. Everybody feels that every coach that's ever been in Cleveland wasn't good enough because none of them have ever gotten opportunities to be a head coach elsewhere.
Right.
But it's not necessarily the case. I mean, sometimes when you don't get a chance, and when you don't get your true chance in Cleveland, you might not get another chance elsewhere. That doesn't mean you weren't good enough to do it. It's just it's just not always going to be the case.
Right.
So history lies based on a couple games, a couple of points here and there, and it's it's real hard to say.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, Jeff, instead of talking current Browns the whole time, I wanted to bring up a topic with you and kind of get your thoughts and your recollections. I wanted to go back and talk about the old Browns and some of your early recollections, but I want to do it a different way. Okay. Most people I have on this show are people who have been following the Browns since the reincarnation or well after. Okay. You've been a fan since well before that. We don't have to give a specific year if you don't want to. But it goes back, to the Brian Sipe days. And I just don't think that people who are fans now and weren't fans back before 99 can really understand what the Browns meant to the town of Cleveland when they were good. Okay. I think people here now, okay, they know the Browns were good in the 80s and pretty good back in the late 70s, but all they hear about is fumble, the drive, red right 88. Okay. So they think it all sucked. Okay. Because everything ended poorly. All right. You know what? The 49ers season ended in a loss this year. Do you think their season was terrible? They had a pretty darn good season, didn't they?
Yeah.
We saw some pretty darn good Browns seasons, some pretty darn good Browns players. And I kind of wanted to go back and look at some of the positive stuff without talking about the negatives and the losses.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you want to, go back and talk about maybe some of the earliest stuff. I mean, I don't know if I don't think you go back far enough to remember Jim Brown actually playing, but that's a little too far probably.
Right. Well, I guess if just for full disclosure, I really started out in junior high school and high school as a Steelers fan. And
I've talked about that on the on the podcast too, because I followed you in that, in that
right,
whatever we want to call it at this point, because we lived in Columbus. We had neighbors who were Steelers fans, and
all of
Let's
our
face it,
closest
the
friends
Steelers
were
were
Steelers
pretty
fans.
damn good in the mid '70s.
Of course, yeah. So it was easy to be a Steelers fan back then.
Yeah.
We would throw the football around and pretend we were Swan and Stallworth, and try to make the leaping catch. And it was in our formative years. Those were the influences because of where we lived and who our friends were and so forth. But when we went back to Cleveland in the late '70s, there was a different vibe around the Browns. It was the Cardiac Kids era. Every win, well, in contrast to the Steelers, who seemed to more or less dominate every opponent, the Browns won. It almost felt like by miracle. Every win was somehow a miracle. That it wasn't a game you figured that they had any chance of winning, and they would somehow find a way to do it. Thus the name Cardiac Kids. So I'll just, I think you mentioned a couple of weeks ago on the show that I was at that Jets double overtime playoff game.
Yeah, I wanted you to talk about that. That's one thing I had down.
The thing to me that was really interesting about it was the Browns were playing in a really crappy stadium. Municipal Stadium was a baseball stadium, but it was a terrible baseball stadium too. There were poles where we were sitting for that game. We couldn't see the punts go up. We knew that the Browns punted, and you'd have to watch, where the ball came back down at the other end of the field because you couldn't follow the arc of it for the overhang. You couldn't see past the overhang. Yeah. But the fans were so crazy and so into it that whole game. And when the Browns ended up winning that game, and we left the stadium, walked out to the car, it was just, everybody was just going crazy the whole way. And we jumped in the car and we're driving through the near west side to try to get, back to the freeway and stuff. And the windows are down and car horns are going off every place, and people in the neighborhoods are all screaming and yelling. And, it was like the whole city was engaged in what was going on at the stadium. I don't think that today the Browns have that same sort of a following, in terms of everybody in town knowing what's going on, and everybody in town being either, living and dying with the team on Monday morning. So it's just a different era now. We watch the games and they should have won this or should have done that. Back then it was almost like the Browns could do no wrong.
And that was in 1979, and the Browns really hadn't been good, since the mid to late '60s at that point. So it's not like they were always good.
Right.
They were kind of coming back and being good for the first time in 10, 15 years at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you get the feeling that I don't know if it's people feel like they've been through so much now, or if they're just used to the Browns being a loser. But yeah, it is a lot different now.
Yeah, I think a lot of fans like me, who really did live and die with the team. We had for those AFC Championship games, we had all our friends over to the house to watch the game, and multiple TV sets set up to watch the game and everything, and giant get-togethers all the time, and on every Sunday. And I think once the team went to Baltimore, there was this this hole of, okay, well, we had invested so much energy
Mhm.
in that prior team, and even though there wasn't a payoff in terms of a Super Bowl victory, we still felt like that was our team. That was, we were invested in that team every week. I think once the team moved, a lot of fans, myself included, never really reinvested to that same level when the Browns came back. I think probably up until this past season, I never really sat and watched every game.
Mhm.
I would record a game and sort of fast forward through it. I would, watch it later in the evening or whatever. There were probably multiple games every year that I just never even watched. Certainly during the 0-16 season, I didn't watch many games at all.
I think some of us couldn't wait for a couple of those years to end.
Right. But last season, with all the hype and we were finally convinced that, okay, this team's turned the corner. We've got good football people in charge now. We believe we have a franchise quarterback and all the other players that, gave us that feeling of optimism about, if not a playoff type of a season, somewhere, close to being competitive, something to build on for the future, So I really, for the first time in I think close to 25 years, reinvested in the team.
Mhm.
I started watching every game, following all the ins and outs, the comings and goings of roster moves and all those kinds of things that I frankly had not even come close to since the team left. So it's, winning breeds that, or even the thought of winning breeds that kind of a belief, a willingness to reinvest. But when it doesn't happen, and that cycle starts over again, it's harder. It's even harder to get excited and want to spend your time on Sunday. But anyway, going back to the good old days, it was easy.
Yeah, some thoughts. I think that back then, compared to now, right now, over the past 10 years, we've rooted for the uniform. We really have.
Right. Yeah.
I think back in the day, however you want to phrase it, those teams in the late 70s and mid 80s that were, the closest thing I've ever seen to, Brown's glory. We didn't have so much, free agency and stuff. Guys were on the team longer. You got to know the players better, and so you had this massive core of guys, and it's that elusive foundation that we've always talked about, over this past year that the Browns need to build. And that foundation is what makes teams good and what generally gets them to the postseason now. But man, when you're bringing back your entire core of linebackers 4 years in a row, and you just know who's going to be out there. When your quarterback starts, 5 seasons in a row, when your offensive line has like one change in 3 or 4 years, it's so much different watching the team.
Yeah.
And it was, we rooted not just for the team, but for those guys.
Yeah, that's very true.
When a guy made a play, it's like you knew that guy. And now it's like, oh man, there's so-and-so made that play. He was our 6th round pick this year. Yeah, great. You don't feel like you know him as much. you might feel a tiny bit, but not like a guy you've been following for five years or more.
Right.
I think it's just different.
Well, that's that's symptomatic of all professional sports at this point, really. That
Yeah.
there's so much player movement. So yeah, fans don't become as familiar with the players. You kind of get used to that turnover. But there should always be some core of players that you do have a rooting interest in.
Yeah.
And I think that you're right. I think that's been missing, really since '99. I maybe some very short stretches in there where you would get attached to a player or a few players on the team, but there's really not been that long-term commitment. I mean, we knew the whole starting lineup, offense and defense for the Browns.
You could name it. I mean, without
yeah.
I mean, it was easy because the guys have been around. Now it's like you got to think about it. No, who's starting at right guard this week?
Yeah,
because it's not even set a lot.
I can probably still name most of those guys today.
Yeah. I mean, the offensive line some years. I mean, it was the same. And it's just so much different. But I think you're right. If we could get even if you got 5 or 8 guys that are with your team for 5 straight years, we haven't had that.
Right.
I mean, aside from Joe Thomas, how many guys have been on the team for more than 3 years? We could probably count them on, both hands maybe.
Yeah, not many.
Yeah.
And again, it's important from a ability to win standpoint, but I think it's even more important from a fan engagement standpoint. With this idea that you have to have a foundation, you have to have players in their 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th year, as pros on your team, and that's the core of your roster. You can always fill gaps in the NFL based on how contracts work and the ability to go out and pick up free agents, so forth. You can backfill, but if you're if 3/4 of your roster is that every year, the fans don't really have an identity there, and to me that's the biggest difference between the 1980s Browns and the Browns of today. Is we don't have that relationship with the players.
Yeah, and that's why we can go back and name more guys from the 80s than guys who have had a cup of coffee here in Cleveland in the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the guys were around longer. They make more of an impression on you.
Right.
So give me a couple of guys who are not not the most famous guys, who were some of your favorite players from those years.
Back then?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Probably my favorite all time. Just not because of me watching him play or anything, but just how everybody reacted to him. Was we had a kick returner. I think he did punts mostly, but his name was Dino Hall. Do you remember him?
Yeah, I remember Dino Hall. I thought he did kickoffs too, but I'm not sure.
Might have done them both. I don't remember, but man, every time Dino Hall would go out there to receive a kick, everybody would just start doing the Dino bark, like from the Flintstones.
Yeah, that was early days of the dog pound too. So all fit together.
Right. Just that kind of a personality. Again, it's just that the fans identified with. Dino Hall was a little guy. He was quick.
Yeah.
He was tough. But he had that charisma that the fans could identify with, and that just made it fun. I always liked Ozzie Newsome.
Oh yeah.
Hard not to. I mean,
Oh yeah.
Hall of Fame player and
Totally professional.
probably a Hall of Fame executive at some point. I had the chance to meet him at a card show one time. Just totally a classy guy.
Yeah.
Didn't look down at anybody. He was in every play. I mean, he just he.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it, but he was involved pretty much. It seemed like he was involved in pretty much every play on offense.
Right.
That's another thing I guess that kind of struck me about the Super Bowl this year was, both teams had really dynamic tight ends. And not just guys that were pass catchers, but guys that were willing to do the dirty work and
Oh yeah.
commit to the entire offense. That's another thing that we've really been missing in Cleveland. We've had a couple of guys here and there that have had some good years. But man, how great would it be to have a guy like Ozzie now that you could just plug in there and he would block, he would get his catches,
Right.
Just that you could identify with every game, every year. So I don't know. There's a couple of the guys that come immediately to mind, probably. I'm sure there are a lot of others.
Yeah, I think having an interesting and punter is fun. That's why, I know you like the Hammer, and I enjoyed watching him this year. But I was thinking of Johnny Evans when he was the Browns punter.
Right.
And he was also the backup quarterback, so he would go out to punt, and then he would trot up to the line, and it would be a fake, and he would just come up under center. Yeah. And how cool that was. I mean, that's been a long, long time ago. Most people probably don't remember Johnny Evans, but yeah, if you want to see the crowd go wild, it's just have your punter decide to come up and play quarterback.
All right. You don't ever see that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. You do if he's your backup quarterback.
Right.
But yeah, those are pretty cool times. A lot of cool guys, but yeah, I wanted to talk about the positives. People need to understand that there was so much good with those teams. We just love those players so much. I mean, we talk and we almost joke about, the negative stuff at this point. I think that's, but it's almost like a thing to cover up how much it hurts, probably still.
Right. It's all coming from a place of, genuinely caring about the team and wanting it to be successful.
Yeah.
We all want the Browns to win a Super Bowl. But more so, I just think we want to feel reconnected to the team.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And this idea of continuity and that just hasn't happened is just preventing that right now. Until we have some people that we can really identify with and grab hold of, I think fans are just at arm's length.
I agree with you.
And you're right. We're rooting for the uniform. We're maybe this will be the group of guys that does it. But boy.
Well, I think we're going to find out what the approach will be with free agency, especially with free agency. I think the draft is obvious. They're going to try to fill their needs with, the remaining needs with the draft. But how aggressive are they going to be in free agency? What kind of time frame are they looking at? I'm sure they obviously want to be competitive now, but are they really going to try to say, "Oh, this is our year. We got to win this year"? Because I look at the best players on this team are still very young. This coaching staff that's put together is very, very young. A lot of most of the people on this coaching staff are people who are taking a promotion to be on the staff. Not all of them, but most of them. So to me, that means you're expecting, a little bit of time for growth for all these people on the staff, and probably for the players too. So to me, that means you should be looking at, a 2 to 3 year plan. I say that doesn't mean that they're going to, go 1-15 this year. They can be competitive. They can go 8-8 this year, but you're still looking at a time frame of, when do they really think they'll be at their best? And maybe it's 2021, maybe it's 2022. Who knows? But I think we'll find out in free agency. I mean, God only knows. We didn't know what was coming before free agency happened last year and all the trades. It changed everything. But yeah, I thank you for sharing those recollections, and I don't want to belabor the point. I think we've probably talked enough about the current Browns for this off season.
Right.
This week, because we'll dive into some free agency and stuff, over our next couple of weeks, and and look at the draft and all that stuff.
No, I agree. It'll be interesting to watch how they build things out. I think you hope that things are built for the long term, and based on how they've assembled the staff, that's what it looks like. It almost has to be, but it's just at odds, I think, with fan expectations, and that's the danger. That the fan expectations aren't met, and these young guys that I think would be good football executives in any organization don't get a chance. And we've just got to see somebody get a chance here in town. We've got to see executives get a chance. We've got to see coaches get a chance. We've got to see players get a chance to really establish a relationship with the fans. It's too easy to just say, "Oh, that guy didn't work out, so we'll move on to the next guy." You never have any emotional attachment to anybody. I think that's been the big story since the Browns have come back, the lack of emotional attachment on the fans' part. So then what does that end up becoming? Well, everything is based on wins and losses.
Yeah. I mean, all you got to do is look at the Super Bowl. Like you were talking about Shanahan's record the past, 3 years, counting this year. And then, look at Andy Reid. I mean, he's been a great coach. He finally gets his first Super Bowl win.
Right.
Okay? He's been a coach for what, 20 years or
right.
20 years plus. Okay, great. It took him 20 years. Wow, he should have won one before that. You know what? The Browns have been back for 20 years. We'd be pretty happy if we had one Super Bowl win, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So people don't want to hear the word patience, but sometimes you got to have patience. I really hope that Haslam will kind of just put the mute button on the fans and on himself this season, and just let this coaching staff and these players work, and let's see what happens. Not just this season, but next season. I just hope I just hope they go for a couple of years, and let's see what happens.
I just one final thought on those '80s teams. They were in some championship games, some conference championship games. Never made it to the Super Bowl. But there were some pretty mediocre years too. It's not like they won every year. But because the fans were invested in the team, like we've been talking about, I don't think that was the most important thing. We loved those teams even when they went 5-11. It was it was great going to the championship game and everything, but we didn't quit on the team just because they didn't make it to the Super Bowl all those years. We remember all those bad plays that whatever prevented us from getting there, but we still loved the team.
Right.
We were still attached emotionally to those players, and there wasn't this need to throw the baby out with the bathwater all the time. And to me, we've got to figure out a way as fans to get past that that emotionless relationship I think that we have with the current Browns. Be happy that we have a franchise quarterback finally. How many years did we not?
Close to 20. Yeah.
We have
20.
We have by consensus the best backfield, depending on what happens in the off season. But but the best backfield in the NFL. We have Nick Chubb is arguably the best running back in the NFL. We've got 2 all-pro wide receivers. Quit focusing on the negatives, like you said. Think about the fact that we do have some guys that we can attach to now that hopefully are going to be here for a while. And if we can just start to build that emotion around those guys, anywhere close to where it was in the 80s, it would be a lot more fun to be a Browns fan.
That's right. Yeah, and going back to those years in the 80s, I mean, people now don't realize the division the Browns played in. The Steelers were still pretty good. You had the Bengals who were going to Super Bowls. You had the Houston Oilers.
Earl Campbell.
Yeah, try tackling him. I mean, yeah, if anybody's listening to this that hasn't watched film on Earl Campbell, yeah,
go to YouTube and just watch Earl Campbell run. He was like a truck.
Watch him destroy some people.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're right. That was a tough division.
Tough division.
You never knew. From one year to the next.
It could have been any of the 4 teams.
Right.
Year.
And they would be Super Bowl caliber type teams every year.
Yeah. I mean, it was tough, very tough, but it was a lot of fun watching those games. Tell you what, all those division games. So
yeah.
Well, it's been fun talking about Jeff.
Yeah, I wish I had more. wish my memory was better.
That's all right.
But not as good as it used to be. But I remember watching a lot of Bernie Kosar games. And those were fun times.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, good talking to you as always.
Yep.
This has been the Browns Blitz. We thank you all for listening, and we will catch you next time.